Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Rotoworld Football Show. I'm Patrick Daugherty, joined this fine Monday, December 8th by Kyle Dvorchak, our waiver wired guru. We're going to take a look at the Week 15 landscape. The fantasy regular season is over. The playoffs are here, so the ads are more important than ever, Kyle. Thankfully, we got a whole lot of good ones. No, there's none at all. It's a pretty bad week. Jalen Wright would maybe be the top guy if Devin Achane was going to miss Sunday's game against the Steelers, but thankfully, it appears Achane is probably going to play. We don't know that for sure. Coach Mike McDaniel made it sound like if it had been a playoff game, Achane might have returned yesterday. Ribs, a lot of times you just get fitted with a flak jacket and they give you 2 Advil and they're like, here, buddy, go out there and to see what happens. So Achane will probably play Week 15. Keep an eye on his status, though. Jalen Wright could be a huge ad. So if we're not counting Jalen Wright, Kyle, who is the top ad for Week 15?
I was going to say Blake Corum. Guy scored a bunch of fantasy points. It was 12 for over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. The first touchdown of which came in the first quarter, I believe, and was truly just a legitimate, this guy rotates in. Sometimes that means he finds the end zone. And even the second touchdown, which came at the top of the fourth quarter, Stafford was still in the lineup. He was still out there on the field. It was total garbage time. But the fact that he wasn't with the backups, and he actually didn't play with the backups, that was Ronnie Rivers, tells me that there's some value to be gleaned from the fact that he busted a 40-something yarder to finally bury the car. I mean, the Cardinals have been buried for a while, but final nail in the coffin. So I was going to say Corum. He scored a bunch of fantasy points. Let's have a little fun. Let's live a little. Harold Fannin, 8 catches, over 100 yards, a touchdown. He's run over 80% of the routes in back-to-back 3 weeks in a row. He's got a 28% target share in his past 3 weeks. You're telling me I can pick up Blake Corum, who I think he probably just reverts to RB4 rankings this coming week. I believe the Rams actually have a fun, but it means close game schedule for almost the remainder of the season, at least the next 2 weeks. I know they have a Seahawks matchup in there somewhere. So I don't think we'll be seeing a ton of Corum going forward. Probably back to usual committee duties and not awfully fantasy relevant production going forward. I think you can start Harold Fannin as a clear tight end 1. Shedeur Sanders has maybe not raised the floor of this offense. If anything, Dylan Gabriel his whole pitch was floor, but there was no ceiling. Now there is legitimate, we saw it last week, legitimate passing game ceiling with Shedeur Sanders in this lineup. Sure, he'll probably turn back into a pumpkin at some point again for the remainder of the season, but he's the one who can and did unlock the Harold Fannin, probably tight end 1 overall as of week 14. Can't imagine anyone outscored him. He's the one who unlocked that ceiling. Let's do Harold Fannin. Have some fun.
Yeah, Harold Fannin has maintained his floor kind of no matter who the quarterback has been for the Browns, including with Shedeur Sanders. And Shedeur, it's going to be a wild ride, but he has actually installed a ceiling in this offense, which, as you said, just was not there with Dylan Gabriel. Really wasn't even there with Joe Flacco.
No.
Flacco just wasn't a good fit for whatever's going on in Cleveland. So Fannin, it does not help that it's just not a good scene and the tight end 7 to 14 range. And Fannin has been really stubbornly steadfast in that range. Solid production. Again, you wish that maybe it was a little better. But
yeah, we can probably pull him out of that range, right? Because we've talked about it, ad nauseum. Really, guys like, Hunter Henry's in this range. Unfortunately, Zach Ertz done for the year, but Zach Ertz was in this range. Brenton Strange was in this range. Guys like Dalton Schultz, maybe even Jake Ferguson.
Yeah, he's fighting with Strange and Schultz kind of right now, and he is a better option than either.
Exactly. I think he's winning that fight. I think, maybe next week again, he goes back to 4 for 40 scoreless, but I think he's won that fight to emerge as the clear leader of the tight end 9 to 16. There are so many guys you could put in there. I think you could put him above all of those guys. Don't have to put him in the top 6 this week, but I think he has emerged from that true morass of just guys.
The only thing that hurts Fannin a bit as an ad is there are a lot of similar tight ends. He's the cream of that crop, but there's similar options. Just real quick this week, under 50% roster. I mean, Bam Knight still under 50% rostered. Chris Rodriguez still under 50%. Blake Corum, of course. Amari DiMercato maybe coming back. Jaden Reed. You might not really want to mess with the Packers wide receiver. Luther Burden, same deal with the Bears. Jaden Higgins is never over 50%. Darius Slayton, Devon Valet, Kamir Dike, Pat Bryant. Just not a lot of great names as you head in the playoffs, which I guess maybe you weren't expecting. But okay, we got a lot of great questions, so we're going to get to them. We'll begin here with Ezra. We have 2 Bucs questions that we'll get to. Ezra's wondering, can he trust Baker Mayfield for his fantasy playoffs, or is he better off streaming quarterbacks? The Bucs offense has really been one of the worst in the league now, the past 2 months, by a lot of efficiency marks. Pretty shocking. Baker did not look good in the rain on Sunday. Looked really, really bad, actually. He's just struggled for weeks on end, Kyle. I mean, the only thing that can maybe change the calculus this week Mike Evans probably back for Thursday night against the Falcons. But Baker, he's been on that borderline for a while now. All 32 teams play this week. Should we still be ranking Baker Mayfield in the top 12, even if Mike Evans returns?
Yeah, I don't know, man. It's not just one game. It's not just two games, but it's frankly like well over a month of just as poor play as it gets for Baker Mayfield. I mean, I'm pulling up his PFF data right now. I'm going to have to keep scrolling. Out of 37 qualified quarterbacks since week 10, I believe they had a week 9 bye. So that's coming off of rest. And it's coming off of rest for players like Emeka Egbuka, who also had a terrible drop as well. The team gets rested up, comes out of the bye, maybe reinvigorated, starts to figure out some things on offense. No, he's been terrible since then. He's the QB 29 in PFF passing grade. He's averaging less than 6 yards per pass attempt. This funk is long enough that it has fundamentally changed how I'm viewing the Bucs offense. And they can come out of the funk, but we should, for the longest time, even in my start sits, last week in my start sits, I was like, Emeka sees 8 targets as a floor every single game. He sees high leverage targets, and his quarterback is a good quarterback. I still think Baker is a good quarterback. You just got to play him. But at some point, you get eliminated. You can't just keep playing them. And that is probably especially true for Baker Mayfield, who it's not like he has a great rushing game in terms of his legs to fall back on. I think, he has to be outside the top 12 this week, right?
Well, he's probably going to be outside the top 12. I will say he'll definitely remain, quote unquote, in the conversation. If Evans comes back, and also if Tristan Wirfs comes back, Tristan Wirfs was missing yesterday in the rain. That was a big deal. But yeah, Baker now, it's to the point where you're looking for reasons to start him. You have to kind of concoct a case to start him instead of, whereas before he was a set and forget starter, not what you really want in the fantasy playoffs. So yeah, if you could have a better option with Baker, consider your options. That's maybe the starting point. Maybe he'll be the best one, no longer a set and forget. So along those same lines, is it too cute to start Chris Godwin and Michael Pittman for the fantasy playoffs, given the circumstances? Kyle, just answer the Godwin one because I'm going to follow up with a different Colts one here. But Chris Godwin caught 5 passes for the first time all season yesterday. But as I said, Mike Evans maybe trending towards a return. Can Chris Godwin be trusted as a wide receiver 3 for the fantasy playoffs against the backdrop of everything we just said about the Bucs?
I think the return of Mike Evans and the potential return of Jalen McMillan as well puts Godwin in a bit of a bind, but really last week for a variety of reasons was, I think, the most important sort of corner for him to turn. He hits an 86% route rate, which is his highest route rate since week 4, his first game of the year, which he gets hurt the next week. And then even after coming back a few weeks ago, they have severely limited his role in the offense. He gets, like you said, 5 catches on a 27%, really strong target share. He's targeted on 23% of his routes. I think he maybe, we'll see. If anything, he's the only player who's doing anything in terms of the pass catchers right now. But maybe he has turned the corner. Hopefully it helps the offense, with the caveat that, like I said, they could just limit his routes once again when they get a pretty strong 4-receiver rotation. Like McMillan is your wide receiver 4. So it's a pretty good wide receiver 4. But, I'm going to trust what the number said last week and say he's back enough to be a wide receiver 3. Pittman, I'm not awfully...
Well, don't answer Pittman yet. And a caveat on Godwin, too, is the short week could be bad for someone who's been nursing along like a really serious... I bet I'll have Godwin outside the top 36 this week is what I'll say. Whether that means you can trust him or not, I guess is up to you. I'll probably have Chris Godwin around wide receiver 40, which feels low. But again, full player pool, a lot of Bucs question marks, including Mike Evans. So keep Pittman in mind here because we have someone else wondering, PBD, OTC here every week. Is it crazy to dump Tyler Warren? So let's use this to answer the question about the Colts offense at large now. Daniel Jones, torn Achilles tendon. Anthony Richardson doesn't sound like he's even going to practice this week. That means Riley Leonard. My everlasting impression of Riley Leonard was kind of along the J.J. McCarthy lines. I watched the national championship last year against your Ohio State Buckeyes, and Riley Leonard not allowed to throw really ever in the game. And that was a pretty common theme for him at both Notre Dame and what was Duke, right?
Correct.
Before Notre Dame. He got to throw a decent amount Sunday because they're coming back. But, man, not a natural thrower of the football, at least at an NFL level. This offense was already kind of consolidating. Like, there's too many mouths to feed for this offense that wants to be run first. Will now obviously even more desperately commit to Jonathan Taylor. What do we do with Michael Pittman? What do we do with Tyler Warren? What do we do with Alec Pierce, who may or may not be in the concussion protocol following Daniel Jones's injury?
Yeah, I wrote up Josh Downs in the waiver wire column, which should be up pretty soon, as an interesting bet if in particular, I mean, it has to be if Alec Pierce misses. He got a concussion check on Sunday. I don't know. We don't know yet if he's in the concussion protocol. He does have a lengthy concussion history. I don't know. I'd be hard-pressed to start any of these Colts with Riley Leonard. Like, I kind of thought he was Taysom Hill-esque coming out of college. And, like, that sounds somewhat derogatory. And as I talk through, I'm like, I might even mean it to be worse than it sounds, in particular because he runs like Taysom Hill, which is not the Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels. If Lamar Jackson didn't throw a single pass, he'd still be a really fun quarterback. Like if he was a terrible passer, he'd still be a really fun quarterback. Maybe not this year, but in most years. If Jaden Daniels was a poor thrower of the football, he'd still be one of the most dynamic runners, running back or quarterback in the NFL. Riley Leonard's more of a thunder type of runner. He very much has that Taysom Hill, like, especially later in Taysom Hill's career. He'll get the ball, he'll plunge forward, he'll be a red zone vulture, and maybe like he did on Sunday, he'll score a rushing touchdown. He had one from a few yards out at the very end of their loss to the Jags. But I don't think his rushing is so valuable that it will like unlock passing lanes for him or unlock stuff for Jonathan Taylor. I just think he's a decent and volume-based runner who will probably not be a great thrower of the football, which is why the Taysom Hill comp comes into play. And even looking back at his Notre Dame stuff, I think he was like a less interesting and less efficient passer than JJ McCarthy, both of whom had that like very clear red flag of their team just chose to never let them throw the football. But JJ McCarthy was at least really like interesting when he did throw the football. And he's even been that way in the NFL. Like every fifth pass is really good. And then just four in between are bad.
On the scripts, we'll say.
Yeah. I don't even know if, I'm not 100% sure Riley Leonard could do some of that, like once you get him throwing in rhythm, if the defense doesn't shake him kind of stuff. Like we saw last week with McCarthy, he played a really good game, just destroyed a poor Commanders team. I'm not sure if that kind of passing output is in the range of outcomes for Riley Leonard. So Warren.
So yeah, it's a nightmare, Kyle.
It's a nightmare, man.
Tyler Warren is struggling to get in the top 12. Should probably be behind a guy like Harold Fannin, for instance. Agreed. And you're basically hoping for big plays and a touchdown with him. And I will say with the injury, Tyler Warren's probably the kind of guy that will get schemed more looks. I feel like maybe some direct snap type of deal. So really? Tyler Warren will probably maintain like big play upside. The floor just disappears. Michael Pittman's firmly a wide receiver 4. I might keep Alec Pierce even in the wide receiver 4 range because, you know, the thesis of the Alec Pierce play is always he needs 167-yard catch. So he doesn't entirely fade away, but Colts in general are now players you're going to be tie-breaking against. It stinks. It's always really frustrating when you get to the fantasy playoffs and someone you've been relying on most of the year, like, what, I just can't do that anymore? But you just can't. That's the reality of the game. Riley Leonard, by the way, Taysom Hill archetype would have been so much better if he could just throw at all. Maybe Riley Leonard can play a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, my ideal
for Tim Tebow.
My ideal archetype for the Taysom Hill role has always been Justin Fields, who Fields is not exactly your idea of a good passer. He can actually throw a pass, though.
Yeah.
And Taysom Hill would have been so much different if he could actually throw a pass. But we might get a few more Colts questions as we go. PBDC here, also wondering about someone I'm sure is on a lot of people's minds. Jaden Daniels is in the firmly can't start him, can't cut him zone. Bank examiners everywhere rubbing their hands together with glee. Is he a top 12 option for the fantasy playoffs? And certainly not trending that direction. I had him just outside the top 12 this week with 4 teams on bye. And now, like, every time he gets hit, he's like leaving the field. Are we making other plans at quarterback if we are Jaden Daniels managers?
I think so. I have some Daniels teams that I'm very pleased to have a Jacoby Brissett or a Matthew Stafford type of player on. I think with this recurring elbow injury at this point, you cannot count on any, and you should not, like they should not be calling designed runs for him. But I also think if he's smart, he'll be scrambling less and going down quicker and breaking less long runs. And the passing has just not come to fruition this year. He looked like a meaningfully better passer as a rookie than he has this year. Some of that could just be the complete rotation at receiver, which they haven't been able to get the whole group healthy, including Jaden. They might have had 0 games with Terry, Devo, and Jaden finishing all 4 quarters. Honestly, they might. If not, it's like 1. Maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe it's the line. Maybe it's the offensive coordinator. None of that stuff really looks like it's going to change. Maybe you could say they're all healthy, but Jaden's not healthy right now, even if he's playing. And like you said, he is legitimately, like, you could project him for 80% of the snaps every single week going forward. Unlike every other quarterback, you're like, the odds of any quarterback getting hurt are pretty low. The odds of him getting hurt are no longer low. They're pretty much in the range. So, yeah, probably not a QB1 anymore.
It's Jaden Daniels. It's always very unfortunate when someone we think answers their questions as a rookie.
Yeah.
just so often they come roaring back. And Jaden Daniels, we worried about the durability of the guy with his frame. He's big, but he's spindly, and a guy who just takes big hits. And it's unfortunate to see that manifesting with Jaden Daniels. A big offseason for the Washington Commanders. We got so many questions to get to. I'm just kind of sifting through them right now. How real is this Devin Neal thing? 20 touches against the Bucks and a W. If Kamara's out, are we thinking about starting him over guys like Rico, Devontae, or Tirico, McMillan? Basically, the question being is Devin Neal going from just like a flex flyer, like kind of a desperation option, like this guy's getting the ball, so I'm getting in my lineup. We'll see what happens. Or is he more of like a workload-based RB2? He had an RB2 workload against the Bucks. Wasn't super efficient on it. We don't know Alvin Kamara's status. I will say on the efficiency thing, it was raining, a lot of very obvious running situations in Tampa, so it was hard for either team to spring big runs. How do we feel about Devin Neal, though, after I'm getting a 20-touch game in Tampa?
Yeah, I'm more lean towards that volume, like RB2. I'd say top 24 is probably safe for you to say for him. Looking at his snap shares over the past 3 weeks, 71%, 81%, 73%. These are really strong numbers. Carry share saw 2/3 of the carries last week. He's been running all of the routes for, basically ever since Alvin Kamara got dinged up. But we talked about this before. If you get a bunch of touches on a bottom 6 offense, it's really hard for me to put you in the top 20. And I think it's just enough to keep him in the top 24. And maybe the Saints can play better. Like Tyler Shuck has been interesting over the past few weeks, had a few decent passing games. He had a good rushing game last week. He had his worst passing game as a starter, but punches in 2 rushing touchdowns. Maybe there's some room for the team to approach a top 20 offensive environment, at which point you can probably have Devin Neal go in tandem, go into the top 20. I'm just not willing to make that leap of faith yet, despite the good win against the Bucs.
Yeah, Devin Neal is still like you're happy to have him on your bench. I'm not really looking for reasons to get him in the lineup yet. Again, he can very much be in your lineup. Anytime you get the ball that much, you can be in the lineup. But he's still someone like, all right, I've got some injuries. Thank God I have Devin Neal. Not it's that I've got the full squad. The playoffs are here. How do I get Devin Neal into my lineup? He's more of like a luxury. I'm like, whatever. I don't know if he's good. I do know he's getting the ball. I like to have him on my bench. That's where we're at with Devin Neal. CJ Stroud, is he on the fantasy radar at all for the fantasy playoffs? Kyle does have a good matchup this week. A stuntman points out in the Arizona Cardinals. They're in complete collapse on defense, but just haven't seen enough from CJ Stroud to even really consider him like a priority streamer for spots like this with Arizona.
No, I when you were talking about Jaden Daniels and saying it's so nice to see quarterbacks answer their questions, or any player, but I think quarterbacks, their flaws can be very obvious, answer those questions as a rookie, where you're saying like these are the pain points of any given prospect. And he came out and answered them as a rookie. And just like Jaden Daniels, they have really flared up for multiple years in a row now. He's the QB 23 on a season-long basis. I know he left a handful of games early, but what that puts him in the top 20, and you think you can play him this week, even in a potential shootout with the Cardinals. I think if anyone can put an end to the Jacoby Brissett fun, it would very much be the Texans defense. And even if Jacoby Brissett and the Cardinals can do some sort of shootout adjacent stuff of their own, it probably looks very much like it did over the past. It was last week versus the Rams. They had one other game where Brissett was like fumble 6 twice or something crazy. It's very easy to just establish the Woody Marks or Nick Chubb, who I know is a little banged up right now, but very easy to establish the ground game when you're going to have your front 7 just teeing off on Brissett. So I think passing volume will be low, and it's not like the efficiency has been elite either. So no, not even a priority streamer, just any other QB2.
Stroud has more than 2 touchdowns 1 time all year, and he has more than 1 touchdown 3 times all year. So concerning year for CJ Stroud. Metal Mask here every week. He's wondering about Drake May's fantasy production the next few games. Are we worried? How much more do the Patriots have to play for? I'm not really worried on that front, Kyle. They're in a dogfight with the Broncos and the number 1 overall seed. That's a lot to play for in today's game. And I think a young team like the Patriots too, the mentality is not going to be, let's take our foot off the gas and rest guys in week 18, let alone week 17. So I'm not really concerned about Drake May from that perspective. How do you feel about him for the fantasy playoffs, Scott? I'll look up the schedule while you're talking.
I already have it pulled up. It's really fun. I don't know why I'd be worried. Bills this week, of course, any of these games can have a letdown spot, but if you're just looking at the totals, this should be a high total, very fun scoring environment. Ravens the week after that, Ravens have been sluggish. I still think that game will have a reasonable total, and then probably low passing volume. First, the Jets in week 17, he'll just throw for 3 touchdowns and 230 yards. And you'll have to be happy with that. And you'll have to say, like, I know he's not going to hit 300 this week. But the reason you get up and you get to run the football against a team like the Jets, or I know it's week 18, but the Dolphins the week after that, is because your MVP quarterback throws a bunch of touchdowns. So no, not concerned at all. Top 3 fantasy quarterback rest of the season.
Yeah, still, I'm not too worried. I have that Jets game in week 17 is a bit concerning. It's in New York, in New Jersey. That is the kind of I'm not worried about them benching their guys. That's going to be a classic. Like, man, let's get the hell out of here. Like let's just get out of this town. We do not need to be here. We're winning this game. I cannot see any scenario where I'm benching Drake May in the fantasy playoffs, though. And you might have to accept that he won't be the reason you single-handedly win that week. But Drake May's floor is just as high as it gets. And the ceiling has been surprisingly consistent despite the surprisingly consistently limited volume. I would like to see him have a 300-yard game at some point. I'll say that. But not worried. Drake May, the least of your worries for the fantasy playoffs. Will here real quick has a question on divisions within leagues. Sounds like he's scamming his league by leading a division at 15 and 13. Should he feel guilty? No, you shouldn't. I mean, it's divisions, that's just how it goes. Divisions I don't find totally necessary in 12-team leagues because you get to play everyone at least once. I never actually am entirely sure why some people do divisions, but you don't need to feel guilty about it. Any thoughts?
I like divisions. I used to be very much of the bonus is stupid. Why is 299 worth 3.04 points less than 300? Like, I wanted it to, like, you could have sold me on like we should play based on EPA. Like, really just get down to like who are the better fantasy analysts amongst us. And the more I play, the more I'm like, do bonuses, do like kick return stuff, especially if you can do it year over year. It is kind of frustrating if your league changes it a lot. But like my home dynasty league has divisions, and I know every single year that like I play this person in my division two times, and we only play one out of division game. And sure, I play in the harder division, and that's been more like challenging for my team. It's probably knocked me out of the playoffs once. But I'm more interested in adding some fun flourishes to fantasy than I probably ever have been before.
Yeah, what I'll say about fantasy football is obviously you have to keep it within reason, but anything that makes the game about more than just injuries. Because like obviously the thing that frustrates us the most about fantasy football is some years you can get too injured and you're just screwed. So divisions don't do this, but anything that makes the player pool deeper, I always like. And just, anything that adds an element of strategy beyond how do I navigate injuries, I always like in fantasy football. So always interested in finding ways make that player pool bigger and make the strategy a little more robust. Bashal Tutin, is he gone? The Jags, I don't know, man. They're making it up week to week with their backfield, which is working for them. They're 9-4. Travis Etienne, pretty ineffective, but really, really stubbornly holding on, like 70% snap share, lead back status. I don't know why Bashal Tutin got carries in 3 goal line series last week and then totally disappeared this week. But not looking like it's not like someone you have to cut loose in a 12-team league, but he's not someone you're getting in a lineup absent an emergency during the fantasy playoffs, right, Kyle? AKA, you probably won't feel bad if you have to drop him.
Yeah, I mean, I know what happened this week. It was he fumbled his second carry, and I believe it was a second carry, and he did not ever touch the football again, at least not on the ground. Maybe he had a reception that I don't know about, but no, he had 0 reception, so didn't have a reception I don't know about. We see this all the time where a guy gets benched for a series or for a half and immediately comes back to play the role he was playing previously the very next week. But the role he was playing previously, like you said, there was the occasional goal line work, which was nice. But in general, the role was you are praying to hit double-digit touches. Like a 10-touch game for Bashal Tutin would be very nice. Goal line is gravy on top of that. Now that's very much in question. If anything, it's probably less likely after they just straight up did not play him following the fumble. He was a fumbler in college too. In his finals, I believe he played 2 years in Virginia Tech. Was a bit of a fumbler there. So I think he's very cuttable. I'd still love to hold on to him because I think he was a good player coming out of college. He's flashed a little bit in the NFL, and they clearly have at times wanted to make him a thing. But frankly, like, would I take him or Algier at this point? Algier. Him or Wright? It's probably Wright. That one's a true coin flip. I think Achane's almost guaranteed to play this week. But like Wright at this point could just be an interesting contingent type back.
It's the time of year where you make quote-unquote tough drops. And speaking of contingency value, a lot of your contingency backs just will get cut. Because I really do believe in the playoffs, you have to maximize for the week at hand. And Bashal Tutin is not maximizing your roster for week 15. You want to have as many options as possible. Stevie is here every week. First off, he makes fun of you for mentioning Blake Corum every single week. Stevie, that's not very nice. And Stevie's a very loyal viewer, by the way. He's a loyal Kyle Dvorchak fan. But Shedeur, the Shedeur Sanders, does he start week 1, 22? I've been wondering this more about Tyler Shuck, to be honest, than Shedeur Sanders. But how do you feel about the prospect of Shedeur Sanders being the week 1 starter for the 2026 Cleveland Browns?
I mean, the Browns, looking at the Browns, the Jaguars pick that the Browns own has been such a roller coaster because they start the year as the one-score game merchants, and then they start fading. But now with the Colts injured and they just beat the Colts, obviously, I guess they're back up top at the AFC South. So they're going to have a top 2-1 pick, depending on where their own pick falls, and then maybe a top 16 or a top 20 pick. They have all the firepower they need to get a quarterback in what is shaping up to be another pretty meh quarterback class. I find it very difficult to think that they will go, what is it going to be like on 4 years without starting a quarterback who is their future? Like, I guess at some point they thought Deshaun Watson was their future, but ultimately he proved not to be. It is just such a long time to be in quarterback purgatory that my slight inclination is that they draft a quarterback this year and that player starts week 1. But I feel much less confident in saying that than I would have 2 weeks ago or whatever. I think sure, if he does this or something similar to this, right, just has one more spike week, he will have shown enough that you could convince yourself that he's the guy. I would still find the GM, just keep firing on quarterback, but I could very much see them biding their time in that they also are probably keeping Deshaun Watson next year in a Kirk Cousins vein of like, you're just stuck with him, man. You made bad decisions. Now you got to keep paying for him. You got to keep paying for those bad decisions. It looks like Watson is probably just a Kirk Cousins type of backup. Nobody wants him. We can't really gain much from cutting him. He's our veteran QB 2 or 3, is on the roster next year, and then they cut him after that. Maybe that's the reason that they don't go quarterback. They keep Shedeur under center, and they kind of just do what they did again this year, but maybe get some development from Shedeur, or if not, they finally pay the cap penalty off. They get good draft picks, and they reset in 2027.
I'd say I would say at least a 51% chance they draft a quarterback.
I do. I 55 is what I call it, but I would have called it like 83 weeks ago.
Shedeur, all he's done so far is clear like the lowest possible bars, but we're not taking for granted he would do that. He's making more positive plays than expected. He's taking way fewer negative plays than expected. We'll see now. Maybe he can get some more robust game plans developed against him by defenses. I think we have a pretty good idea by week 18, like how realistic the Shedeur thing is. Right now, I'd still say it wouldn't be the world's best plan. Alex is wondering, who is he starting this week? Rico, Mr. Doddle, or Chuba Hubbard? It seems like they recommitted Tirico in week 13. He was really banged up. He got the week 14 bye to heal up. I'll probably still pretty comfortably have Rico ahead of Hubbard. Do you have a counter take to that, Kyle?
Well, no, in week 13, I believe he only outcarried Chuba by 1, and I believe Chuba outproduced him in general.
I thought it was week 12, but I actually cannot remember, to be honest.
Just in general, Rico's been sadly on the decline, and you pointed out it's because he's just, we don't know, but that's probably just because he's not very healthy. He's been on the injury report and in and out of games for like a month now. And on the other hand, all of that, not only time off, Chuba missed time earlier this year, but then all of these light workloads have probably helped Chuba get as healthy right now as he has been since like week 4 or whatever, when he got banged up. So I think I would still start Rico. I still think Rico has played better enough this year throughout the entirety of the year that you can say any sort of short-term trends should not override the fact that Rico has played better, but it is as close as it has been since the pre-Rico breakout, basically.
Yeah, the only thing, Rico needed that bye. Week 14 buys are insane to me. Rico Doddle really needed that bye. Jackson Gillette's wondering, can he jam Kenneth Gainwell into his lineup? Kenneth Gainwell has at least 6 catches 3 of the past 4 weeks, Kyle, including Sunday against the Ravens. But he'd be doing so over Jalen Waddle, Tetaroa, RJ Harvey, or Woody Marks. Kenneth Gainwell has definitely not risen to the level where we're looking for reasons to get him into our lineup, right?
Yeah. No, I didn't think I needed to elaborate too much. I agree. Like in PPR leagues, you were very happy to have picked up Kenneth Gainwell. Like targets per route run and target shares are pretty crazy. Over the past 4 games, target shares are 19%, 10%, 21%, 28%. Like if you told me those were DK Metcalf's target shares, like, oh, DK Metcalf starting to turn things around on targets. And they're the running backs target shares, like over 30% of targets per route in 3 of his past 4 games. Like you said, he's been a good PPR back, but he is still like very clearly the team's RB2 in terms of carry shares. He does not have a carry share over 30% since week 11. He does not have one over 35% since he got the start when Jaylen Warren missed time. He is very clearly in the old school James White, where's some other Chris Thompson, these like pure pass catching type backs. We don't have too much anymore. That Aaron Rodgers has the forgotten recipes to cook up, but that's just what he is. He's just an RB4 who catches a lot of passes and still doesn't see a ton of work between the tackles. I would not put him over any of these guys unless you like really wanted to pitch me hard on playing him over Marks, but even then, I wouldn't do it.
Gainwell's just a classic. You're happy to have him. Like I mentioned earlier with Devin Neal, different situation than Devin Neal because like the touch floor is much higher. Gainwell, you're happy to have the option. You are not looking for ways, contriving for ways to get him into your lineup. We have someone here wondering about your Blake Corum obsession. Should they drop Jaylen Warren or DeAndre Swift for Blake Corum? I supposed to say no. You don't need to get into that one, Kyle. Jesse is wondering, he's calling him Wandale Earnhardt for some reason. I might be a nickname I'm missing, but Wandale Robinson. Actually, I understand the comment immediately.
You had to finish the sentence.
Yeah. So is Wandale Robinson, though, going to keep his foot on the gas? I trust him over Jalen Waddle, Amarian Hampton, RJ Harvey, or a hobble Drake London. Unlike Kenneth Gainwell, a Wandale Robinson is making this more interesting, where you at least have to start consider playing him over certain guys. I still think he's on the outside looking in of like forcing his way into a lineup over like name brand players. He's going to be in most lineups. But say you have a really stacked team. Are you playing Wandale Robinson over these type of players? The answer is probably no.
Yeah, not over Waddle. I mean, Hampton will get more information by the time you need to make this decision. London, hobbled or not, he's the team's best wide receiver. No, I think the biggest thing for me is that the way Jackson Dart uses Wandale Robinson is the way fantasy managers, and I think Wandale Robinson, don't want Wandale Robinson to be used. Jackson Dart back in the lineup. What was like 2 weeks ago, right? They're just coming off a bye. 4.6 ADOT. Still sees plenty of targets, but he was also seeing plenty of targets with Jameis under center, with Russell Wilson under center. And those guys are worse quarterbacks than Jackson Dart. They just make fantasy more fun. And they did it specifically for Wandale quite well, who had like 2 wide receiver 1 or 2 overall weeks, both of whom came without Jackson Dart, who very much just treats Wandale like the check down PPR and ultimately a fantasy wide receiver 3 type of player. And you've got players better than that on this roster.
Let's drill down real quick on Jaylen Warren. We have someone wondering, would you drop Jaylen Warren or DeAndre Swift for Bam Knight or Blake Corum? No, I would not do that. As frustrating as DeAndre Swift is, by far the best option there. Warren's still better than Bam or Corum. But then someone else trying to drill down on, are we playing Gainwell over Warren? Every Steeler basically got home yesterday except for Jaylen Warren. Again, Kenneth Gainwell is more of a pass catcher than getting anything between the tackles, but that's not good news for Jaylen Warren, he's the classic guy. His fantasy value mostly rests on like getting most of the work. That has not been happening. Would you rather play Kenneth Gainwell over Jaylen Warren? How do you feel about maybe doing like a desperation drop of Jaylen? Most people are not going to be in a position to drop Jaylen Warren, but what would happen if you did, Kyle?
I agree that if you had a good option to drop him for, you're probably not going to regret it. Warren is purely a 2-down back at this point, and he's more like a 1.75 down back. He doesn't get every carry. Like I said, Kenneth Gainwell has gotten less than a third of the carries for almost the entirety of the past month. I mean, for almost the entirety of the season outside of one single game. It's Jaylen Warren's backfield as far as between the tackles work goes. But the Steelers are not a great offense at producing efficiency between the tackles or efficiency in general. They're just scraping by. They're probably going to make the playoffs, but they're not going to do so on the back of an awesome offense. I still think guy who gets 2/3 of the carries outweighs Kenneth Gainwell, who gets a bunch of targets, but it's not a runaway race. I would go Gainwell or go Warren, excuse me.
Yeah, it's very, by the way, Stevie points out, he said he was not making fun of you, that I was just being a hater and I have a negative mindset. I actually, knowing Stevie, I think he's probably telling the truth. He likes players like Blake Corum. He's always looking for like an edge, looking for a sleeper type. Benjamin David, very loyal reader, viewer. He said, my God, I made it to the playoffs with Justin Jefferson, but can he continue to play Justin Jefferson during the playoffs? I don't know what your more expanded thoughts are, Kyle. Justin Jefferson, my thought is there's a few guys like this every year, like a name brand, like first, second, third round pick that just finds himself in like a catastrophic situation. A lot of people don't like this old school advice, but to me, Justin Jefferson is the kind of guy where I feel like you just need to get eliminated with him in your lineup as opposed to on the bench.
Oh, and
you will. Things are gotten dire enough, though, that if you have actual options on your bench, you could consider it. Where do you fall on benching Justin Jefferson? Because JJ McCarthy had an okay game against the Commanders. Zach Kruger pointed out to me, though, it was mostly just the first 2 series, of which we know the first was scripted. Maybe part of the second was scripted. Any hope at all for Justin Jefferson as we head into the playoffs?
I mean, like you said, doing well on the scripted stuff has not always, it actually has kind of been JJ McCarthy's calling card, but even then, like doing a really good 2 scripted drives, and I think he had 1 other touchdown pass as well. It's the best game we've seen from him by far. It was against a really bad Commanders defense. That, however, is the hope. Even in the good game, Justin Jefferson, 3.1 fantasy points. When was the last, he has no good games this year. You can bench him. You can absolutely bench him. Imagine if you got a Wan'Dale Robinson on your bench. I was just saying how Wan'Dale Robinson isn't as fun with Jackson Dart. I think I would try to take Wan'Dale Robinson over Justin Jefferson.
I mean, that I could definitely see. I mean, what if it's more like true wide receiver 4 territory, like Adonai Mitchell, like DJ Moore?
Not DJ Moore.
Yeah, DJ Moore is an even more extreme version, really, of what's plaguing Justin Jefferson. I mean, Tyrod Taylor starts this week. Would you start Adonai Mitchell over Justin Jefferson?
I think so. I think I would.
Well, let me pull up the rankings really quick. Sorry for this dead air here. I am interested in establishing the Justin Jefferson line. Justin Jefferson or Devon Vele?
No, Jefferson still.
Justin Jefferson, we don't know what happened on Monday night, or Keenan Allen.
We don't know Keenan Allen. I'll say Keenan Allen.
Darnell Mooney.
Come on. Okay, come on.
Kymir DK.
Jefferson.
Jerry Jeudy.
Jefferson.
See, benching Justin Jefferson not as easy as you thought, was it there, Kyle?
No, it's not easy. It's not easy. People will have the opportunity to bench him. Not everyone will or should take that opportunity.
But we've got a lot of good questions. Here we go. So I'm kind of going out of order now. Did the Titans unlock Tony Pollard? And do I have to play the matchup game with him versus Woody Marks now, or just go with Marks, keep Pollard on the bench warming it? Pollard had been trending kind of in the right direction. Yesterday's blow-up was really out of nowhere. It was snowing the whole game in Cleveland. I don't know if that advantaged Pollard or not. 2 really long runs, but even beyond the long runs, still a decent amount, like 8 to 10 yard type gains. A kind of game where he just had not gotten all year. Well, his whole career. New career high for rushing by 30.
Mm-hmm.
Did this reestablish Tony Pollard as at least a viable flex option, say in the RB 24 to 30 range?
I wouldn't have him in the top 24. I mean, I guess there's a little bit of wiggle room 24 to 30. It is nice that, like you said, he had been trending in terms of workload. He had pretty much established himself as very clearly this team's top back between the tackles. But man, what is that worth as nearly 2 touchdown underdogs on the road against San Francisco, or the week after that as a touchdown underdog versus the very stout against the run Chiefs? Maybe in the fantasy championship at home, I believe, versus the Saints. That's a good spot for him potentially. Very similar to how it played out against the Browns. As long as the Titans can keep a close football game, I trust them to give Tony Pollard the football a lot. They're not going to get that opportunity this week. I would easily take Woody Marks over him. And I believe, we just talked about it. The Texans play the Cardinals, who they should pretty much boat race.
Yeah, I mean, Pollard, be thankful it happened type of deal. But yeah, do not go chasing this. Again, Pollard, he's a break glass in case of touches emergency. You need a second flex, or God forbid, even an RB2 who you at least know is going to play. Tony Pollard's at least going to play. But these Titans offensive environments are not going to be getting any better. Kind of like a start-sit jumble here. Tetaroa, Nico, or Rice, pick 2, full PPR. If MHJ is still out, who will be going? Michael Wilson goes out saying Jerry Rice 2.0. Michael Wilson, pick 2 of Tetaroa, Nico, and Rice. I mean, you're going to bench Tetaroa here, I feel like. Is that the answer, Kyle?
I think it's probably closer than you do between him and Nico, but I think I still agree. Yeah.
Tetaroa is trending in the right direction, but I mean, Nico is still the kind of Nico, is what Tetaroa is trying to become, I would say, both as a real-life player and as a fantasy archetype. Rashee Rice, talk about a calamitous game. That was one of the worst games I've seen by any wide receiver all year. It was kind of out of nowhere for Rashee Rice. Yeah. So I'm not too worried about that. I do think he will shake that off, but also kind of hard game to shake off. That was really, really bad performance by Rashee Rice.
Well, certainly there wasn't one immensely worse catch or non-catch that ended the game right after that.
To be honest, the Kelsey and Rice ones were almost as bad. I mean, the Kelsey one was batted into an interception, but
yeah,
the
Kelsey one just got punished a little more and was worse timing, but the actual, like, you should catch it, the catch probability when you're watching it was probably not the same.
The Rice 4th down drop was a drop, but it wasn't like you have to catch that.
Yeah,
but it was still a drop. It was
bad. It was very bad. Yeah.
Jesse's wondering: Brees, JMO, Jefferson, or Jacoby on PPR? Do we shoot for floor or ceiling in the playoffs? The playoffs, you shoot for ceiling. You're trying to maximize your amount of point. I mean, it depends, I guess. Obviously, assess your opponent's roster. In general, though, I aim for ceiling in the playoffs over floor. You agree, Kyle? I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially because when you think about once you make it to the playoffs, what types of teams are you going to be seeing? There are teams that project for a lot more points than you were seeing on average in the regular season. Maybe if you're a massive favorite, like you are the top dog going into the playoffs, and you're facing a lower seed that you project to beat easily, you could probably side with a little, like you could at least consider floor at that point. Like bank your points because all your players are good and your opponents are not. That's not usually the case in the playoffs. So in general, I'd say ceiling, yeah.
I will also say just, try to treat it like a normal week, I guess. So you're not getting like outside your own head, like trying to hack the playoffs or whatever, which I wanted to do in our guillotine league. So by the way, I did survive, Kyle, because of the Rashee Rice stink bomb. We were essentially tied going into Sunday Night Football. I was up by 7, and I had Kelsey because I couldn't play Kittle this week, and I decided to play Kelsey over Tyler Warren. He had Rashee Rice. So I was maybe one of the only people in America actually happy at the Rashee Rice drops because it advanced me to the finals in the guillotine league here. Let's see. We had a lot of good questions still. Where I was one I was going to pick. How do we feel about Kyle Monungai heading into the fantasy playoffs? He's a tough one to know what to do with. A legit big role in this Bears offense. Still more just an RB3 role than RB2. There could be weeks where it produces almost no points. How do you feel about Kyle Monungai? A guy producing fighting for a bigger share of the Bears' touch pie every week, but still not to the point where he's like, you got to start Kyle Monungai no matter what.
Yeah, this week is a good one. It's a home date versus the Browns, who we just saw give up a career game to Tony Pollard. That is Tony Pollard playing on the worst offense he's ever played on, and probably the worst offense of 2025. If Pollard can get there, so can Monungai, even on what will be a committee role, right? He's just marginally every week between 1 and 4 carries more than DeAndre Swift. Swift plays the passing down, so their touch totals can be equal or even flipped. I believe DeAndre Swift actually had one more touch this past week. You tell me he gets 15 carries and a catch versus these Browns, and I'm thrilled. I'm saying he made my lineup, and that's probably what's going to happen. So like you said, he's a committee back on a team that's good but not great. It's not going to matter too much this week. Most weeks he's an RB3. I do think there's a legit chance you rank him as a top 24 back this week.
In a vacuum, are you starting Rico Dowdle or Kyle Monungai? Just in general during the fantasy playoffs.
Monungai.
Wow. Really?
He just plays for a better team.
Yeah. Dowdle mode doesn't move you, though?
It used to move me. It used to, man, the hits, man, I was a fan of Rico Dowdle way back. But now the new Rico stuff, the new stuff Rico's been dropping hasn't been great for my fantasy lineups.
Stevie's wondering, do we have a personal Michael Wilson, a guy who's never done much, but we just know would go full rookie Odell? I've given a chance. Is the main one for us Josh Downs, Kyle?
Yeah, I had Jaden Reed in there too. You know what's funny? I have Jaden Reed in there. I have Josh Downs in there. I would say you could say this about Jordan Love if he played for a different team. I think Jordan Love with 40 pass attempts a game plays like Drake May. And they just won't let him do it. They
will not let him. I'm scanning through the teams real quick. I mean, Adonai Mitchell was not to that level, but Adonai Mitchell was a guy who I thought got mothballed like a little too early. So I would like to see him get some actual quarterback play down the stretch. I'm scanning the teams here. I almost said I did not. I was like, should I say Kayshon Boutte? The answer is no. I should not say Kayshon Boutte because I'm not actually that big of a believer in him. Josh Downs is the first guy who came to mind, and probably the only safe one to say right now. We have a question that just says Jalen Coker ? Tell the folks about Jalen Coker, Kyle.
No answer. I believe it's 2 weeks ago now because they're coming off their bye. He had a legitimately good game. He scored. It was his best fantasy game of the year. He earned targets, and it was T-Mac's worst game of the year, I believe. With that being said, It was a 1-game sample. And the sample size on Jalen Coker is that he's been running plenty of routes, isn't earning a ton of targets. And we know T-Mac is this team's clear number one receiver. We also know this team does not want to throw the football. So the pie is small, and the share of targets available to go around after you take away what T-Mac is going to earn is pretty limited. So Jalen Coker question, no, period, mostly. He's a good player, but...
Tanner Cox here, then he really wants us to answer this one. We're going to answer it for him. Wan'Dale Robinson, Devontae Smith, or Jaden Reed in Week 15. I'll probably still go with the really boring answer of Devonta Smith.
Me too.
Jaden Reed, by the way, can we rely on this guy in a 12-team league during the fantasy playoffs? I'm not really thinking so. Despite the upside is real. The upside is very real. The downside is just all too real. Like a donut is a pretty grave possibility if you start Jaden Reed during the fantasy playoffs. Shocked you actually agree with that.
He played. Like, I was just talking about how much these Packers frustrate me. They have a lot of cool, fun football players, and they give it to Josh Jacobs a whole lot.
Oh, okay. And so the guy who said Coker ? He's wondering. Sorry. So thank you for clearing that up. Capitalize. Would you start Jalen Coker over Justin Jefferson?
No, I wouldn't go that far.
To be honest, I thought Coker ? Was a perfectly fine question.
No, we get questions like that all the time.
Yeah, I thought that was fine. We've drilled down. So if you're wondering what our take is on the Colts without Daniel Jones, we did answer that at the top of the show. Sorry to be the quote unquote that guy. So we won't rehash that. We didn't get into the effect on Jonathan Taylor, though, Kyle. Obviously, the wagons will be circled around Jonathan Taylor, who's been in a bit of a funk by his 2025 standards. But does the lack of a real quarterback just make the offensive environment you're not benching Jonathan Taylor, of course, for fantasy playoffs. But what is the effect of Daniel Jones being out and hurting this entire offensive environment? Is Jonathan Taylor going to be carrying teams at all, or is this kind of are you really nervous if you're a Jonathan Taylor manager?
I'm pretty nervous. I mean, I think this could be a situation in which there's just not a whole lot he can do. If you're an opposing defensive coordinator or a head coach who calls defensive plays or it's just game planning, what are you going to do? What are you going to do when you see Riley Leonard lining up and you're like, how are we going to stop this Colts offense? You're stacking the box, and that even covers 3/4 of the base that Riley Leonard is standing on because he's also a runner. So to me, Jonathan Taylor was, this is not just my opinion, it's basically true, is he was such a good player because he is so good at taking advantage of a great offensive environment. This Colts team was tailored to create explosive plays for Jonathan Taylor to the point where you saw them kind of hide Daniel Jones from time to time because they could afford to do so, because they were efficient when they passed and it opened up running lanes. That was elite for Jonathan Taylor. It's what made him the RB1 overall for the first 2 months plus of the year. They will have none of that going forward. He'll still see probably more like this person's question, his workload might increase. He might get 25 carries. What do I think his odds are of scoring a 40-yard touchdown next week versus what they were 3 weeks ago? They're lower, even if he's getting more carries. And I think they're lower by a lot.
The only thing I'll say, if you're looking for a positive or just not super bad Jonathan Taylor story to tell yourself, you could say the Malik Willis Packers last year, where they didn't try to pretend Malik Willis was a throw-first quarterback, but they designed really good game plans around their run-based quarterback. Mm-hmm. And the Packers stayed alive and didn't embarrass themselves without Jordan Love last year. If you're looking for a good Riley Leonard outcome, it would look something like that, where coming out with a really sophisticated run-based game plan and the rookie hopefully executing it. But that's an outlier outcome. That is not going to be the most likely outcome for Riley Leonard and the Colts. Chad's here. Chad, hello. We haven't seen you for a while. Chad's a long time viewer, reader, listener. Mm-hmm. And does Tyler Shuck give Nick Foles vibes to you guys? I feel like it's actually a pretty good comparison, although Nick Foles never scrambled like that. That feels like a oddly good Tyler Shuck comparison. How does that strike you?
My memory of Nick Foles is really positive. My memory of Nick Foles is the Chip Kelly touchdown to interception ratio year, or obviously the Super Bowl run. So I think I have an inflated opinion of Nick Foles, who ultimately he wasn't a special quarterback, right? He got put in some fun situations and made the most of them, but wasn't that good. So if you limit it to that, I would say yes. And I'm curious. I truly don't know if this Shuck rushing will hold. I believe he had 55 yards on 7 carries, 2 touchdowns this past week. He had 40 yards combined in the previous 2 weeks, also rushed in a 2-point conversion. He was not in any capacity a runner in college. I kind of comped him in that specific sense to CJ Stroud previously, where I think he's more athletic than having no rushing yards at all would let you think. Like his rushing prop, at least heading into the past few weeks, versus someone like Matthew Stafford's was like 8 yards difference. He's not like an 8 yards better runner than Matthew Stafford. He just chooses not to. There's no choice for Matthew Stafford. He's never run the football. There is a choice for guys like Stroud, for guys like Shuck, and they choose to sit in the pocket and throw the football. Maybe this is just a mentality shift in the way he's choosing to play or what's the situation around him is forcing him to do. I think it'll stick a little bit. I don't think he's got 55 yards and 2 touchdowns coming anytime soon. I don't think he's QB1 viable. I do think he's 2 QB super flex very viable.
Good answer. We have a question here on Michael Wilson, Jerry Rice 2.0. Seriously, anytime, I think he's gotten 15 targets all 3 games. Marvin Harrison Jr. has sat out the past month. Like totally insane usage. As you said, the party could stop this week. Houston Texans, Jacoby already taking a walloping, like a total beating because he actually stands in the pocket. And they're always playing from behind, so it's always obvious passing situations. Jacoby is unfortunately at risk of getting like tie-rotted, I feel like, and getting injured just because of all the hits he's taking. But if Marvin Harrison Jr. is back this week, I mean, do they really try to pretend Marvin Harrison Jr. is the first read, number 1 receiver? Mm-hmm. They did that when he returned in week 13. After what just happened again, is that going to happen again, Kyle, or are they going to actually commit to Michael Wilson as their number 1 wideout?
I kind of don't think they will. We've seen them. They've told us with their actions what they think. And I will say a little bit, at least some of what's happening right now is simply the product of a quarterback who throws 50 times relatively accurately and downfield. I mean, that's truly the biggest difference. It's passing volume plus the aggressiveness, which Kyler Murray early in his career seemed like he had a bit of an aggressive streak throwing downfield. And that was just beaten out of him time and time again to the point where he was one of those check down heavy quarterbacks in the NFL. I think if we saw Marvin Harrison healthy with Jacoby Brissett, which has happened for like 1.25 games, I'm not going to say he would put up Michael Wilson numbers, right? Like you can't project that for anyone. But I think what we are seeing when he's healthy with Jacoby Brissett is he's out there enough and running enough routes and earning enough targets that it relegates Michael Wilson. Like it's frankly the fact that Michael Wilson can do what he does and Marvin Harrison Jr. can big time him is a compliment to Marvin Harrison Jr. because Wilson has played so well in those now 3, it was 2 before this past week, games without MHJ. I would not be super confident that they don't just do what they previously did and just say, Marv, you play this role and you've played it not even as well, but you're going to keep playing it.
Do you think Michael Wilson will be a controversial player in offseason best ball drafts or not really? Will it just be treated as a full outlier?
It so depends on who they get at quarterback. I think Jacoby Brissett's actually under contract for 1 more year. I'm not sure what the point would be of keeping him around. Like they're not winning games with him, right? No. It's just fun. It's fun for fantasy. I think if they get a competent quarterback, he could be very controversial. If they somehow get stuck with like Kyler again, or they go the rookie route, we're just going to be underwhelmed. Like everyone will be. The supporters and the deniers will both be like, we all know how this is going to go.
Yeah. If I don't see him being like a super interesting offseason best ball player, which seems shocking based on how much he's produced. But man, yeah. Well, anyway, I'm getting excited thinking about offseason best ball drafts. That's probably a sign of sickness, even though I don't even draft that time of year. How worried should we be about Derrick Henry's week 16 and 17 matchups? Kyle, Derrick Henry struggling of late, offense struggling of late. It is the New England Patriots and Cincinnati Bengals this Sunday, though. So Bengals, Patriots, Packers. How do we feel about Derrick Henry for the fantasy playoffs and this degrading offensive environment in Baltimore?
I mean, Bengals, I know the last time they played, it was not the type of game we become accustomed to. It was the Thanksgiving game, right? Where they had 40-40 overtime shootout games the past 2 or 3 times they had matched up, and we just didn't get that. Lamar didn't look right. He's not looked right all year. I would still bet on Derrick Henry as an RB1 against the Bengals specifically. I still think that's a game that probably is more likely to shoot out than not. And it's a game where Derrick Henry is more likely to run over this weak Bengals defense than they are to bottle him up. Patriots is a different beast. Patriots are a better team than the Bengals. They're a much, much better run defense than the Bengals. I don't know if I would have them ranked as an RB1 for that game.
Patriots have an elite run defense, and yet, man, the Ravens, this team's broken. This team is broken. I wonder, man, I wasn't even going to throw Andy Reid in there. I was like, between the Steelers, the Ravens, and the Chiefs, I wonder who'd be more likely. Andy Reid would not get fired.
Correct.
Even Tomlin would not get fired. I doubt Harbaugh would get fired. But I wonder which team would be most likely just for the coach. Like, you know what? I'm going to resign. Like we need to change up the feng shui here. I don't even know where I'm going.
Sort of like Pete Carrolling him, where I did Pete Carroll technically resign because they kept him in?
No, he was fired. They tried to basically say they tried. He made it clear later on it was not mutual though.
Yeah, and I think I remember reading he didn't really show up as a consultant, but they at least tried to make it seem as mutual as possible. Where most teams just on the flight home you get a notification that you're fired or whatever. Whereas there seemed to be some sort of understanding that Pete Carroll had done great things for them. So I agree that the breakup will have more feelings tied to it between these guys. I think Tomlin's the first to go. I don't think it happens until
I think Harbaugh would be the first to go, to be honest.
I can see it, yeah.
How do you feel about Andy, by the way? Well, I've been watching the Chiefs a few times lately. Man, I nothing to really make me question Andy's eliteness as a head coach, but just a team that has too much history, I would say at this point, almost too much muscle memory. And
I agree.
The Patriots, we saw many different iterations of the Brady offense. It was always changing. I feel like the Chiefs need a bit of a shakeup. And it's hard to say because they don't drop 6 passes. They just win that game against the Texans. But I do feel like maybe the Chiefs almost have too much muscle memory at this point, and definitely not are in need of a fresh voice. Not in that you got to fire Andy Reid.
I agree. I think the Patriots comp was a good one. At the end of the Brady era, it was just I don't know. We always won by Brady checking it down. They had no downfield options at that point. Gronk had retired. It was the corpse of Julian Edelman was left on this team. It was I don't know. We always won by playing great defense and having high efficiency, kind of like the Chiefs are doing right now, and kind of like how it's not working with the Chiefs. And I don't think Andy Reid is entirely the problem. I would love them to fire Matt Nagy and try something else at offensive coordinator. I think that is the very clear, you should not fire Andy Reid, right? You shouldn't.
We're not even pretending that's a consideration. That will not happen.
Where it is a consideration for Tomlin and Harbaugh. These guys, they won't be, but I think it's at least worth talking about. It's not worth talking about for Andy Reid. I do think something has to change. And I think OC is the very, very obvious spot for that to change.
Something at the very least, get a Reid guy who's been out of house for a few years,
sure,
with a different organization or something. Something needs to change. Something needs to change with the show because it's over. We have to end it. We're out of time. We appreciate your questions so much. We got to as many as we could. You've been making the show go around all year long. We hope you continue to do so next Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern on the NFL and NBC YouTube channel. So for Kyle Dvorchak, I'm Patrick Daugherty. Check out Kyle's waiver column. Again, check us out next Monday, and we'll be on the site all week.